This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. Today we're going to continue to talk about show and tell, and we will be focusing on the three image types. The simple idea: pictures are great, but not all pictures are equal. Let's go back into show and tell. And remember, we had the first rule, tell the truth. Second rule of a great presentation, tell that truth of the story. And the third rule, of course, is tell that story with pictures. So when are we going to use these pictures? Simple answer: always. The sharing of images is a human dream. Whenever we have the chance to share them, we should, especially when we're giving a presentation. Here's what I'm talking about. Let's look back over the 32,000 years that humans have been drawing, and here we see some of the drawings from the walls of the caves of Chauvet in what is now France. Oldest drawings ever found anywhere on Earth, and aren't they beautiful? We like to look at them, and there's another part to this picture that I left off. Let's uncrop it. Isn't it fascinating how we love to look at these drawings and know that they came from people who were our ancestors? Remarkable. On the other hand, those are the only way, apparently, that 32,000 years ago they had to share ideas. What was in my mind, in any permanent way with your mind, is draw those pictures. Well, and now today, we may make fun of our caveman brethren, but let's recognize between them and us, there's a whole vast amount of history which has taken place, and we're going to see that so much of it is focused on our pictures. Now, if 1,500 years ago or so you wanted to have someone communicate what was in their mind into our mind, you'd probably want to hire someone like this guy, who had the capacity to do exactly that, because what he could do is he could make these incredibly beautiful illuminated texts. So not only could he draw these miraculously lovely pictures, but that gentleman could also write. That's why they're called illuminated texts. The words are illuminated with the beauty of the pictures. And at that time, in this age of the Book of Kells from about 800 AD, that was pretty much the only way there was to be able to get an idea from my mind into your mind in any sort of a permanent recorded way. And it wasn't all that long ago where if you wanted to move beyond that, let's say you wanted to get a snapshot of your lovely daughter. How would you go about doing that in the days before photography? Well, you'd have to hire a painter to come in, and the only way to record what your family looked like would be to have that painter make that image. And of course you'd have to invite him into your palace, because if you were going to be able to have a painting made, you'd have to be a real millionaire in order to afford it. That was the only way there was to record what somebody looked like. And then of course Gutenberg came along and invented this thing, and that sort of changed everything, didn't it? Because all of a sudden, with this printing press, you now had the ability to make ideas go into the permanent record, because you could now print things that looked like this. And here's what's kind of ironic about the invention of the Gutenberg printing press was that was movable type. So all of a sudden, the conveyance of ideas becomes really focused on words, because words are far more efficient to reproduce than the images are. So all of a sudden we see a preponderance of words being the mechanism that we use to communicate. And then presses advanced, and we jump into more or less our modern age. And if you happened to be in San Francisco back in 1906, you would have access to a newspaper that was mass printed. And now you had both the ability to get words and very rudimentary, simple images, black and white, taken from rough photographs and turned into etchings. So now we had the ability to pass images along, which, let's face it, is what we always wanted to share anyway. And then the daguerreotype photography comes into play, and all of a sudden I can begin to share what I saw with what I'd like to share with you. And then with the arrival of photography, all of a sudden I don't have to hire a painter to paint what Grandma looks like. She can have her photograph taken, and all of a sudden it's actually somewhat affordable. And for the first time ever in history, we can know what our ancestors used to look like, because they could afford to have photos made of themselves. And if we jump forward a few years, all of a sudden to the days of Kodachrome and Ektachrome, and now we've got color photography, and we could take pictures, and now we know what people look like, and we know what they look like in living color. And wasn't it amazing? And here's where I'm going to say, as we switch to today, is it really all that surprising that companies are spending billions of dollars to buy these software applications that allow us to instantly take images and share those images? All we're seeing is the culmination of a historically long desire to take what's in my mind, the things that I see, and share them with you. And no wonder social media and images have run so fast. So why, I want to ask, do so many of us, when we see an image like this, think that there's something bad about it? There's nothing bad about this at all. You know what's really going on here? She's just doing now what the rest of us have wanted to do for 32,000 years. The technology now exists to instantly capture exactly what I see in my mind's eye and pass it on to yours. That's why we use pictures. And okay, so what pictures are we going to use then? Well, we've been over this several times, and we know now that in order to illustrate any story, we only need 6 pictures. We need something that shows who and what, something that shows how much, something that shows where, some picture that shows when, another picture that shows how, and lastly a picture that shows why. And just with those 6 pictures we can communicate any idea that we've ever had. And here are the 6. When we want to show who we're talking about and what, we draw our little portrait. When we want to give numbers, how much are we talking about, we draw our chart. When we want to show where things are located in space, we draw our map. And when we want to show where things are located in time, we draw our timeline. But now let's say we want to combine these and show how do things work. What's the cause and effect that we'd like to illustrate? We now use our flow chart. And when all is said and done, what's the equation? What's the moral of the story? What's the one picture we want to take away that describes why we did all of this? We've got our little visual equation. And those are the 6, and we know those. So to add these pictures to our story, we're going to use the 6 by 6. And here's what happens. We all know this. We use this 6 by 6 pie to simply translate what we say, who and what I'm talking about, how much am I talking about, where are they, when did it happen, how's it going to work out, why am I even talking about this? We translate what we say into what we show. Who and what gives us a portrait. Whenever we talk about how much, we draw a chart. Whenever we talk about where, we draw a map. Whenever we talk about when, we draw a timeline. Whenever we talk about how it worked, we draw a flow chart, and whenever we answer the question why, we should draw a little visual equation. So now we know what pictures to draw, and let's give an example. So last time we talked about, can someone explain a complicated idea like chess to me? Well, yes, I can. And here were the 6 pictures. My portrait showed who the players were, black team, white team. My chart showed how many of those pieces do I have, and how important are they to the game. My map showed where do those pieces sit at the beginning of the game. My timeline showed what's the flow, the sequence of those pieces moving, and when the game is over, I could draw a flow chart that showed exactly what happened to let you know how it was that I was able to win, all in service of this big visual equation at the end. Why did we go through any of this? Because our objective in this particular game was to have this king knock down that king. Now those are the 6 pictures, and we're going to use them all the time. So we've talked about when to use pictures, always. We've talked about which pictures to use, the 6. And now I want to talk about something that we have never discussed before, not in any of my lessons, the types of pictures that we're going to use. Now what do I mean by that? I think the best way to represent this is to just show you an example. So here we have a photograph, and this is very important. It's a photograph of Sir Ken Robinson. Sir Ken Robinson is a leading thinker on educational reform, and Sir Ken Robinson became well known in particular after he gave a talk at the TED conferences. And his original talk back in the year of 2006, you can watch it on YouTube, and what's remarkable is Sir Ken has received over 6 million views of him talking while we're looking at photos of him. Okay, so why is this interesting? Because here is another video also found on YouTube, also from Sir Ken Robinson. In fact, it's almost exactly the same speech. And here we don't have a photo, but here we have a set of drawings. And they are animated drawings that are created by hand as we watch the speech. And what's remarkable about this is this same speech on YouTube has almost twice the views. The photograph of Sir Ken receives 6 million views. The drawing of Ken receives 11.5 million views. That's what I mean by the type of the image. Are we talking about a photograph? Are we talking about a graphic? Or are we talking about a drawing? And those really are the 3 types that we have to choose from. So as we think about which pictures, the next question is, how will I create them? Will I simply find the right photograph? Will I find some kind of simple graphic? Or will I create a drawing? When I talk about the types, that's what I mean. For today's session, we're going to just talk broadly about the three types of images that we have. As we look into our next lesson, if you come back in 2 weeks, what we'll be looking at is how to choose the right photos for presentations and how to create the right graphics for presentations. And then the next session after that, we're going to focus the entire time on how to draw the simple pictures that will appear in our presentations. But again, for today, let's just look at the three and imagine when might we use one or the other. Photos are really good. Isn't this a beautiful photo? Let's think of some of the things that are great about using photos in a presentation. Well, number one, they're unbelievably easy to find. Online image search using those sorts of technologies that we were looking at that little girl using on her phone recently, aren't they amazing? They're a gift from heaven, the ability to say, hey, I'm looking for bird. And all of a sudden, look at the beautiful bird that we can find. No need to draw anything. There's the image right there. And boy, are they colorful and evocative. Photos are good. But you know, there is a downside to using photographs. Let's talk about some of the problems with using photographs. You know, they rarely show exactly what we want. I mean, I had a very specific thing in mind when I was thinking of bird, and this is a great photo of a bird, but it's not exactly the one I meant. And photos tend to be too specific. So let's say all I was really interested in was the concept of bird, and I showed this image to someone. They might say, oh, well, that's a yellow-bellied sapsucker, or whatever the heck kind of bird that is, and isn't it interesting because it's shown here in spring plumage, it should be blue in winter. That's not what I'm interested in. There may be too much specific information in my photograph. Challenging to edit, certainly. Let's say I did want to make this photo blue. Well, I could go into Photoshop, but that's going to be very, very difficult. So challenging to edit photos to get them exactly as we want. And let's admit, there are lots of usage and copyright limitations. We want to recognize that photographs belong to other people, and if we're going to start putting them things that we spread far and wide, we're going to make sure that we want to have the rights to use those images. And then here's a last, really subtle instance about some of the problems with using a photograph. A photo, because it is so visually powerful and so specific and so colorful, can tend to easily overshadow me as the speaker. We want to be very careful. Remember that we're on stage here too, and we want to make sure that when we're showing photographs, people continue to look at our message, at us and our message, as well as absorbing the lovely photo. Now let's talk for a moment about graphics. Graphics are great as well. Well, here's a graphic, another bird. This is a very famous graphic of a bird. This is the Twitter bird. Isn't that a nice little graphic? So when we think about graphics, what I'm referring to is a very simple, abstracted view of the object, made very, very basic and usually in just a couple of colors. A very graphic, almost mechanically made image. Well, so what makes graphics good? Well, the pros are we can make custom graphics to show exactly what we want. We certainly can. And you know what? It's not too hard to create graphics using even the basic drawing tools in any presentation app. You know right now that I'm just using good old PowerPoint, and let's say I wanted to create a graphic of something. You know, I could use the basic PowerPoint tools to go ahead and create a really nice graphic, make it very simple, and just use basic stuff and have my drawing. And you know, they're relatively easy to keep simple. And they're also relatively easy to start to get too elaborate and too fancy. So those are some of the good things about graphics. Now, what are some of the less than ideal things about graphics? Well, as we talked about, it's very easy to start to make them too complex. The more we start to work on our particular graphic, the more details we begin to add, and before long, we've got something that is really, really elaborate. That's not always very good. They require some time to create well. In part, it just takes time to learn what not to put into our graphic so that we can keep it very, very simple. And there is a truth that graphics, by definition, because they tend to be made almost mechanically or appear to have been made by a machine, they tend to be visually cold. Now, if we want to give a presentation where we want to be really human, that can be a problem. If the intent of our presentation is to be very buttoned up and very professional, perhaps that coldness is exactly what we want. And we might find that's true typically in reports and pitches. Let's now talk for a moment about drawings. Drawings, I think, are wonderful. There's a lot of great things that happen with drawings. With a little bit of practice, it requires very little time to create almost anything that we want. Let's say I wanted a drawing of a person, and that person was happy, and that person was carrying a sign, and that sign said good. If that's exactly the image that I wanted, I can make that in about 15 seconds. Takes a little practice, but we can do it. And you know what? They show exactly what we want because we are going to make that drawing. They're warm, and they are inviting to look at. This is very human. Perhaps it's not super professional, but if I really wanted to appeal to someone's human side, hand-drawn pictures are wonderful because they show that human touch. And you know what? Our drawings, with a little practice again, are pretty easy to keep simple. All we have to do is just stop drawing. But there is a downside to drawings as well. And you can imagine, of course, that drawings require basic drawing skills, something that most of us say, oh, I don't know how to do anymore. So that's why I encourage you to come back 2 sessions from now, because we're going to, again, spend the entire time just focused on how do we go about actually drawing simple pictures, starting with the most basic of shapes, working our way up through little stick figures, and then making our way into more complicated little drawings like perhaps this lovely bird. And there is the other drawback. Subtle again, but sometimes our hand-drawn pictures can be overly cute, and often the word we'll hear is that they can be a bit patronizing. Well, do you think I'm stupid? Well, no, I'm not saying that. You think I'm a child? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think very often drawings are the perfect way to describe my idea. So what we're going to want to focus on is using our drawings when we know that our presentation is one that's really focused on being very human, very upfront. In particular, that's only going to be a problem with reports and pitches. With our other presentation types, our drawings are going to be very good. Let's take just a couple of moments and look through some of these in more detail. So here's a photograph. It's a very pretty photograph. There's a lot of colors going on. And I tell you this, I would never use this photograph in a presentation. The only topic that this photograph is effective for, because there is so much going on in it, and it is so visually distracting, would be some kind of presentation about plenty, about having lots and lots of stuff. That would be the only reason to use an image like that. Based on the subject, what if, because I think an image that's much more effective is one like this, especially in a presentation, because I can look at it and I can know immediately exactly what this is about. This is clearly about that particular apple. And you know, here's a thought. It's a very colorful, very beautiful photograph. I would probably use this one in a presentation. But you know what? It could also become so evocative that it's entirely possible to switch it into black and white. The image remains. We don't have all of the visual overload, but we've still got a lovely image that we can look at and know exactly what our eye is supposed to focus on and not distract too much from the person over here who's presenting. And or, you know, we could just do a nice hand-drawn picture of an apple. Well, there it is. It's evocative. I immediately understand what it is. And live during the presentation, if I really wanted to be particularly clever and engaging, what I could do during the presentation is I could then add something to my drawing, and I could say, well, let's go ahead and color that apple and make it look even more real. And we'll put one of those windows on there, and then we'll really go ahead and color it in. And all of a sudden, look at that. Now I've got a simple drawing that becomes very enjoyable to watch and sticky to the eye. Well, you know what? We could also simplify that and move back from the drawing back into a graphic. A very powerful, very evocative symbol. How would that work if we drain the color out of that one? Wow, look at that. All of a sudden the image is just as powerful and just as evocative and not quite as distracting. Very simple. And let's see if we simplified that graphic one step further. Would it still work? It absolutely does. In many ways, it becomes even more powerful. That is the beauty of a powerful, simple image. And that's exactly what we've been talking about. Really quickly on homework, I want to stay with the same homework lesson. I really like this one. I want you to tell a picture story. So go out there, find, photograph, or draw any one of the 3 that we've been talking about today. 3 or 4 or 10 pictures that tell a story without words. Pull those pictures together into a little PowerPoint or Keynote deck and go ahead and tell us a story if you can using just those pictures. Create it into a little slideshow. Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that, and I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the constrained proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.